Greetings everybody and welcome back to the Austin Lindsay channel. So today I'm photographing models holding some products. So the idea here is to have the models interacting with the wellness gummies in fun and playful ways. So this company has an office we were able to use, and they already had a few things set up, which was a white sheet on a backdrop stand and then a very large octabox with an LED constant light attached to it. And I want to say this is somewhere around 5 feet-ish. The largest softbox that I brought with me was around 3.5 feet, so this thing is super helpful. I swapped out the constant light for one of my AD400 Pros because I wanted to use higher f-stops around maybe f8, f11 or so. So if I were using constant light, I'd either have to raise my ISO up really high, adding noise, open my aperture up, meaning I wouldn't get the depth of field or everything in focus that I wanted, or slow down the shutter speed, which would cause the models to be a little bit blurry, which I didn't want because they were moving around in some of these shots, and I wanted to freeze that motion. So using a studio strobe is the only way to do that and keep my camera settings where I want and still get those shots. And the other key player in this light setup is this 5-in-1 foldable reflector. I wanted enough shadow to still shape the model, but I still wanted things filled in enough to make it light and airy. So for the background lights, I'm using Profoto D1s. The final images will be cut out from the background, so I wanted to try and make it as white as possible without, fringing or haloing on the model on the edges. So this makes it easier to cut out in Photoshop having this solid white background. And I decided to use the Profoto D1s because I knew I'd need much more power from lights on the background, and I didn't have to rely on battery-powered lights for the whole shoot. So these images were for the launch of a brand new product gummy line. So while the bulk of the product was in production, we kind of had to cheat a little bit. So we filled the bottles with Dots candy just for the shoot to make the bottles look a little bit more full. And then after that, it was just playing around, getting some fun imagery for the launch. This is kind of going to be a lot of random tips and tricks in this video, so I hope you enjoy this. But let me go ahead and show you the light setup I've got going on real fast. So the main light is on the camera right side. I have this large diffuser that a friend made, and then I ended up adopting. This is Lee 216 gel, and then I think it's about a 4-foot square diffuser. Behind that is my main light. This is a Profoto D1. This is lighting up a softbox. This is about, I want to say 2 feet by 3 feet. So then we have our backlights. I have two AD200 Pros as the backlights, and they have Pulsey buff strip boxes on them, no grids, just to blow out the background. Actually, you don't want to blow out your background. You want the background to be just under 100% white or under 255. The reason for that is if you just blow out your background and turn to full power, you'll get some haloing on the edges of your product and it won't look sharp. So you want to make sure you're aware of that when you're shooting white backgrounds. I also have for the main light a Super Flags bounce card, just reflecting some of the light back for fill. And then I have a AD400 Pro as like a ceiling light, another fill light. So this is bouncing off my ceiling about right here-ish. And this is actually bouncing behind the product here, because if I bounce it in front, you'll see a little bit of a specular highlight on the round edge of the bottle, and I don't want that. So I have it bouncing from behind and then just giving some fill light, really just bringing up the exposure of the white foam core that basically my table here, and that just brings up my exposure so it doesn't look super dark. So when you're working with a new client, depending on the type of photos you'll be producing, sometimes you have to sort of learn their inventory. This client sent me a big box of product they needed photographed and a few notes, but I still had to do a lot of organization. Since much of this product was still in pre-production stages, some of the bottles came right from the factory and had the manufacturer's label on them. And also, not all the final labels were finished and printed, so one of the things I needed to do was remove the manufacturer's label off of some of the bottles, then fill them with product and photograph them without the label so that the designer could place the correct one on in post once the designs for that product were finished. The other semi-tedious task with this job was The gummies in the manufacturer's bottle were called one thing, but the name my client was calling the product was something different. So for the bottles that had the final labels, I had to make sure the right shaped gummies went in the bottle with the correct final label so that I'd have to go back and reshoot anything. So I made sort of this handmade looking spreadsheet to keep myself organized. I mean, I started with a Google spreadsheet, but I found that rather than having to switch from Lightroom to the spreadsheet, enter the data, then come back to Lightroom, it was just much easier to have the iPad on my lap and maybe make a note or mark something off with the pencil. All right, so not all of these containers are full. Some of them only have a little bit of product in them. As you can see, some of them don't have the right labels. They're just taped on to the bottle here. So this is what happens when you're starting and taking all your pictures from scratch. You don't always have all the product. So what I need to do is fill up the bottle so it looks full. So what I'm going to do is leave a little bit on the bottom here, fill up with probably some of these gummies here. Some of them are actually dots, like the candy dots. So I'm going to put some of these in the middle and then fill the rest of the actual gummies on the top. So let's go ahead and try this. I'm going to put these in this little cupcake thingy just for safekeeping. And now we have, looks to me like a decent amount on the bottom. So if you're going to look at the bottom here, it'll look like the original gummies. So I'm going to grab another one of these and use it as a layer because these gummies are kind of sticky. So I don't want the good ones sticking to the bad ones, essentially. So I'm just going to squish this right in here. It's not the greatest of barriers, but I think it'll work to keep most of them from sticking together. Because after I shoot these, I do have to pull out individual ones and shoot just the gummies themselves. Alrighty, so now we have our gummies on top. We're going to put our cap on it. It looks like there's gummies on top and bottom, and no one's the wiser. So, and this is our shot. You can zoom in here. You can see on the top and on the bottom. Looks really believable. I'm liking it. The other thing I have going on here is this black twist tie, or twisties as I used to call them when I was a kid. What this does is mark the center in front of the camera, and it also marks how far from the back of this board I want to be. So when I put a new one in there, I just try to match the center of the bottle up with the twisty and then bring it right up to the edge of it, and then I know it's aligned. So one other random thing you can do along with that black twist tie on the back to try and line things up to the lens. So there's marks inside the viewfinder that show you where you want to line up your focus or your product so it'll be in focus. You can see there's 9 little squares that line up with the label. So what I've done is you can take a flashlight and just shine it through the back side of your viewfinder, and then the light will go through the lens and land on your product, so that way you can see in real time where it is. This only works on SLR cameras because of the prism inside, but if you just shine this through, you'll be able to see here. The light is on the bottle here. So then if you notice, the marks, the focusing marks will actually project onto the bottle here, and then I can actually just physically in real life turn the bottle and see where my focus points line up. And you can obviously use live view, but this is just kind of a fun little hack that I use to quickly line things up while I'm shooting. All right, new day, new shirt. I'm shooting just the gummies themselves, so I'm making little piles of them. What I'm gonna do is add some of this stuff. It's called butyl. It's actually weather sealing for your windows, but this is good molding stuff. Something to keep in mind, this is a little bit oily, so this will leave marks on your products. You wanna be aware of that. But for the pile of gummies, I'm just gonna use this just to make a little riser, and then I'll stick the gummies around this so I can make a nice little pile. Once I get everything semi-set up on my lap, I can actually put it in the position it's going to be, and then I can turn on live view in Lightroom and then do a little bit more fine tweaking. So something I also need to do is shoot the gummies individually because we need to swap out the gummies in the model's hand holding up the gummies next to their face. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try and put a toothpick just in the mid-air here, just have a suspended gummy that I can cut out in Photoshop really easily. So what I'm going to do is use one of these large magic arms. They make various sizes. This one is for the standard baby pins. They have these smaller ones for, they have 1/4 threads on them. So I'm going to hook this on. This also has a Manfrotto grip on the end of this. This is a separate purchase usually. And this allows me to have an arm here that I can move around. And then I'm going to use one of these other clamps. This is also by Manfrotto. These are just a little clamp that has a few different areas you can clamp onto. Hey, Editor Austin here. I'm kind of rambling a bunch in this clip. So basically I have a magic arm attached to a light stand, then the Manfrotto clamp at the end of that. I was going to have that hold the toothpick, but the jaws aren't really designed to hold something that thin. So I clamped a regular spring clamp to the Manfrotto clamp, which was better suited to hold the toothpick.